It's official, Christopher Bell will be with Joe Gibbs Racing next year. But will it be the Xfinity Series? Will it be the Cup Series? Not even Christopher Bell knows. So let's talk about that. How's it going, you guys? My name is Eric, and welcome to Out of the Groove. Very full show for a Saturday. You guys know me, I don't usually upload episodes on Saturday. You know, it's the race weekend getting into full swing. The Xfinity race is probably going on right now. But yesterday, there was just too many big storylines that came out. I couldn't not talk about them right away. We're going to talk about Christopher Bell, we're going to talk about silly season, and the president of NASCAR went on the radio yesterday and said that we might not see as many schedule changes in 2021 as we originally thought. We'll talk about that in a minute, but I want to start with silly season stuff because Christopher Bell, just casually talking to the media yesterday, dropped the first big kind of bombshell of the 2020, going into 2020 silly season. Christopher Bell is the top prospect in the Xfinity Series. He won 7 races as a rookie last year for Joe Gibbs. This year he's already got 4 wins, looks like a championship favorite again. Everyone knows he deserves a Cup Series ride. The question is just, when's he gonna get it? And we might be one step closer to answering that question after what Christopher Bell said yesterday. Here's the clip from Bob Pockrass, Fox Sports on Twitter. Christopher Bell discussing his contract situation.
Yeah, I will be I'll be somewhere, so.
Somewhere with Gibbs.
Yeah.
So, all right. So you're good for one. So you extend it for 1 year.
Yeah.
But you don't know whether that's going to be Xfinity or Cup or
No,
what?
not right now.
All right.
It's
but
a little bit too early to
he's
tell.
committed to paying you next year.
I guess that's
right?
what
Is that the way
means.
you can put it? Okay. Well, is that a good thing? I mean, is it good to be at
It's
least
really good that I have a
someone
job, and driving for Joe Gibbs Racing is where I want to be at. So I'm thankful that I get to go for another year. My words got, I guess, spun around a little bit. I didn't mean to ever say that I don't enjoy racing the Xfinity Series, because I love the Xfinity Series. I love the cars, and I've said it multiple times. The rules package that we have right now is so much fun to drive. So I love where I'm at, and next year, I have no idea where I'm going to be at, but if I'm in Xfinity again, then I have a ton of fun racing there, so I'm okay with that.
Now, I've seen conflicting reports here. I've seen some reports that say Joe Gibbs picked up Christopher Bell's option for next year, but then I've seen other reports calling it an actual extension, indicating it's a new deal that they just signed. I don't know exactly what it is. It sounds like it's an actual extension, a new deal, but some people said they were just picking up the option. There is an important distinction there, in my opinion. But yeah, let's talk about those comments. So firstly, yes, Christopher Bell will be under contract with Joe Gibbs next year, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be driving a Joe Gibbs Racing car. Drivers can be loaned out to other teams, so that means that there's still probably a decent chance Bell could end up with Levine Family Racing in the Cup Series next year, a Toyota JGR affiliate team. It's not technically Joe Gibbs Racing, but, if Joe Gibbs was going to loan his driver anywhere, it'd probably be to them. Joe Gibbs did the same thing in 2017 with Eric Jones. Eric Jones ran his rookie season with JGR affiliate Furniture Row Racing, and that was kind of the same thing. Joe Gibbs was in the room when Eric Jones signed that contract. It was a 1-year deal with the intention of him coming over to Joe Gibbs Racing the next year, and that's exactly what happened. I'm betting that the same thing is probably going to happen to Christopher Bell next year. I said this last week. That's my prediction. I think Christopher Bell will be driving for Levine Family Racing in the Cup Series next year. I'm not sure yet if it's going to be that 95, if he's going to replace Matt DiBenedetto, or if he's going to they're going to start up a second team for him. I think it's more likely he replaces DiBenedetto, but that's still my opinion. I'll explain more about it here in a second, but I think Christopher Bell will drive for Levine Family Racing probably in that 95 next year for 1 year, and I think 2021, I think Christopher Bell likely will be actually at Joe Gibbs Racing, the main mothership team. As a result of this announcement yesterday, I also believe that Eric Jones now is safe at Joe Gibbs Racing for at least 1 more season. I think he'll still be in that 20 car next year. And my rationale for that is, if Joe Gibbs Racing knew that Christopher Bell was going to be driving the number 20 Cup Series car next year, he probably would have tried to sign Bell to a multi-year extension. When Eric Jones replaced Matt Kenseth in that 20 car in 2018, it was on a multi-year deal. I tend to think if Gibbs already knew Christopher Bell was going to be in the Cup Series next year, he would have wanted to lock him down for at least a couple seasons. That's my thought process. It sounds to me, with this 1-year deal, Joe Gibbs still doesn't exactly know where he's going to put Christopher Bell, but it sounds to me like that 20 car in the Cup Series will not be an option. Eric Jones and his team have said recently that contract negotiations between them and Joe Gibbs Racing are progressing, and that they think a deal will be struck fairly soon. I think Eric Jones stays in the 20 for at least 1 more season. I think Christopher Bell will be elsewhere next year, not in that 20 car. Now, by signing Christopher Bell to a 1-year deal through 2020, Joe Gibbs could keep him in the Xfinity Series for another year. That is a real possibility, as you heard in that clip. He could put him in the Cup Series, likely with Levine Family Racing. That's another very real possibility. That's what I think they're going to do. And what this provides Joe Gibbs is it gives him 1 more year to kind of move pieces around and possibly find an opening for Christopher Bell at the main Joe Gibbs Racing program. Now, the one driver we know he won't be replacing in 2021 is Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch earlier this year signed a multi-year extension with him, Joe Gibbs Racing, and Mars, M&M's, and I think Interstate Batteries even signed like a 2-year extension. Kyle Busch, as far as we know, is locked up through at least 2021, so Bell won't be replacing him. Unless there's a surprise retirement, like with Carl Edwards a few years back. I'm going to turn my attention to Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex Jr. Both of them, their contract situations are kind of unknown after next season. We don't know how long Truex's deal is, and Denny Hamlin's deal with FedEx, it's reported, might be up after 2020, which means 2021, Bell could be eyeing that 11 car. By the end of the 2020 season, Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex Jr. will both be more than 40 years old. I believe that there's a very good chance Joe Gibbs is going to end up putting Christopher Bell in one of those cars in 2021. And now it's going to be a really tough decision because this year, Truex already has 4 wins and Denny Hamlin's got 2 wins, including the Daytona 500. Eric Jones is winless this season, but he has a lot of potential and he's still got a pretty inexpensive contract. I think Eric Jones will still be with Gibbs fairly long term, at least for a couple more years. So that's why 2021, I think there's a very good chance that there will be a spot open at the top level of Joe Gibbs Racing. I think the 19 car or the 11 car will be open, and I think Joe Gibbs plans on leasing Christopher Bell out to Levine Family Racing for a year, 2020, and then 2021 putting Christopher Bell in either the 11 or the 19 cars, whichever one, the other drivers can't find sponsorship for. A lot can happen in a year and a half, and Joe Gibbs, no matter what, is going to have some very tough decisions to make. And Joe Gibbs is not unfamiliar with making tough decisions, and this is what's really important to him, and that's why I think this 1-year deal with Christopher Bell is so crucial. Joe Gibbs and Joe Gibbs Racing, Toyota, that whole system, they've lost a lot of really promising young talent in recent years because they just haven't had space for everyone. William Byron, Bubba Wallace, Daniel Suarez, Ryan Preece are just some of the names that come to mind. People who started or were driving at one point for Toyota in either the Trucks or Xfinity Series and now drive for other teams. Noah Gregson's a more recent example. Of all the drivers I just named, Christopher Bell might be the most talented, might be the driver with the highest upside. So you gotta believe Joe Gibbs Racing wants to hold on to him. So what I think happened here in this deal, I think Joe Gibbs has guaranteed to Christopher Bell that he's going to be making close to, if not, Cup Series level money next year. Even if he keeps Christopher Bell in the Xfinity Series, there's got to be some sort of incentive there that Joe Gibbs offered to Christopher Bell that made this a no-brainer for Bell to agree to. Joe Gibbs knows that Truex, Hamlin, some of those guys aren't going to be around forever, and I think he is looking at Christopher Bell as a long-term investment. He's paying him probably a lot of money next season with this new deal. I think even if Bell races Xfinity next year, he'll probably be the highest-paid Xfinity driver. Now, if Bell goes to Levine Family Racing, obviously he will definitely be making Cup Series level money, but I think that's the only way Christopher Bell could have agreed to this deal. Because if I'm Christopher Bell, that's the thing. I'm a little surprised he would agree to this deal so early into the season. There's rumors, reports that there might be a couple Stewart-Haas racing cars open next year in the Cup Series. If I was Christopher Bell, I might not have signed the first deal that came across my desk. I might have at least taken a phone call with Tony Stewart or Gene Haas or somebody over there to see about driving the 14 or the 41. Because if I'm Christopher Bell and Joe Gibbs isn't guaranteeing me a Cup Series ride in 2020, I'd be curious to see what other options were out there. Now, if Joe Gibbs just slid a huge pile of money across the table and said, hey, stay with me, kid, we'll get you in a Cup car by 2021, I might have signed that deal, which is what I think probably happened. But I just find that very interesting. I admire Christopher Bell's apparent loyalty to Joe Gibbs, but Joe Gibbs Racing, Joe Gibbs has made it clear in the past that business comes first. He cares about personal relationships. He really likes his drivers. He's formed a long-term bond with Denny Hamlin, Kyle Busch. But when push comes to shove, Joe Gibbs has shown in recent years it's about business. He basically dropped Matt Kenseth, who at the time was the second best driver on that team, in favor of Eric Jones, who was still unproven at the time. So when push comes to shove, it's about business for Joe Gibbs. So Christopher Bell showing that he's loyal, showing his allegiance to Toyota, to JGR, might work out for him best, but in the short term, I'm telling you, he could be stuck in the Xfinity Series again next year, and we all know Bell is better than that right now. Anyway, I know that was kind of all over the place. Hopefully you understood my personal analysis of this whole situation. It's very interesting. Again, I wish NASCAR and the teams made their driver contracts more public. A lot of this we're just having to guess. Like, if Joe Gibbs really did just pick up Christopher Bell's option, nobody made it public that he had that in his contract. Like, we didn't know what Christopher Bell's deal was. If they made that information public, it would have been a lot more interesting for fans like you and me to discuss, and might have created more engagement around the sport. Just saying. Anyway, I don't want to blabber on about this for the entire episode. We do have to talk about another bit of interesting news from yesterday, something I didn't expect to hear about, but it came out and we got to talk about it. I mentioned this at the top of the show, but Steve Phelps, president of NASCAR, went on SiriusXM NASCAR radio yesterday morning and made some interesting comments about the Gen 7 car, but more importantly about the proposed changes to the schedule in 2021. It's been hyped up for quite a while now with the way contracts are ending after 2020. 2021's the first year in a long time that NASCAR can make potentially some crazy changes to the schedule. And when I say crazy, I mean taking away some tracks, adding tracks maybe we haven't talked about in a while, that kind of thing. And with NASCAR also buying ISC recently, that deal, assuming it goes through and is approved, that gives NASCAR a lot more flexibility when it comes to making these schedule changes. But Steve Phelps went on the air yesterday and said he does not expect there to be wholesale changes when it comes to the 2021 schedule. Here's his full quote. It's kind of a long one. I'll discuss it afterwards. He said, "We don't have the schedule dialed in for 2021. Lots of discussions about where we would race. I think if you would look at the 2020 schedule, we move things around, and I think the fans, again, from the research that we did, by and large were thrilled with the changes we made. I think there was an industry buzz. The drivers were excited, the teams were excited, and most importantly, the fans were excited. But we're racing at the same tracks, the same number at each racetrack. So in 2021, we have new sanctions that we need to do for 2021 that will obviously dictate where we go. We will go to exactly the same number of racetracks, the exact same number of events. We probably won't. I don't think there are going to be massive wholesale changes." Kind of all over the place. I feel like my words are just swirling around me today like a hurricane or something. But in a nutshell, it sounds to me like he's just telling the NASCAR fan base to, hey, pump the brakes, brace yourselves. You might not like all the changes we make in a year. Which, given all this energy we've seen around, the sport recently with, them buying ISC, with them trying to buy SMI, with them, making these changes to 2020, which I applaud them for. I think the changes they made to next year, I was impressed with how many changes they were able to make. And I think a lot of them were for the better. But with all these recent moves, it felt like we were leading up to something crazy in 2021. We keep talking about Nashville Fairgrounds. We're talking a little bit about Rockingham. We're talking about tracks we haven't raced at in over a decade. The hype, the energy around this was just growing and growing and growing. And the president of NASCAR yesterday morning kind of just said, ho, everybody, let's pump the brakes there. And that's a little disappointing, but I'm not going to sit here and overblow it, maybe like some people would. He's not saying we're not going to see changes to the 2021 schedule. It sounds like they're not super far along when it comes to negotiations for 2021. Sounds like a lot of options are still on the table. And I think, given we've talked about it on this show, some of the snags they've run into with places like Nashville Fairgrounds Speedway, it sounds like maybe NASCAR is not going to be able to make quite as many drastic changes as they were originally hoping. So I will say I do kind of applaud Steve Phelps for having the gonads to get out in front of the national radio here and just kind of a year and a half in advance kind of warn NASCAR fans that maybe it's not going to be as crazy as we thought. Better to let us know now than have us wait a year and then when they make the announcement it's super underwhelming. Better to kind of let us know now if it's not going to be crazy or anything. I like that he's setting our expectations here, and maybe they'll still blow us out of the water. Maybe they'll do something crazy in 2021 that we haven't talked about, but at least I like that he's keeping our expectations level. It's just kind of disappointing given all the energy and all the kind of excitement that I feel like NASCAR has been, mixing around the last few months. This sort of feels like, a slap in the face. I'm back to reality here. Kind of off topic, but Phelps also said in that interview that NASCAR is currently on track to meeting that 2021 date for the new Gen 7. They publicly announced that goal a couple months ago, that they were going to try and have the Gen 7 ready by 2021. He didn't really offer any specifics, but Steve Phelps seems to think that they're still on track for meeting that goal. Still not sure how I feel about that. They still don't really have very many specifics when it comes to the car. We've heard rumors, speculation, reports that suggest they're going to keep kind of this lower horsepower going forward. We don't know anything about the downforce. We don't know anything about like the splitter and stuff they tested during the All-Star race this year. There's still a lot of things we don't know. But at least from the president of NASCAR, he still thinks they're on pace to meet their 2021 deadline. So I guess that's encouraging. I'd have no real reaction to it because I just don't think it matters until we hear real details about what the car is going to look like. That's basically it. That's basically my entire reaction to this situation. Still a lot of just general blanket statements coming from NASCAR that don't have a whole lot of meaning. But I guess, I don't know. We'll talk about the real news when it comes out eventually. But that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. I enjoyed talking about that Christopher Bell thing, even though I think I was talking in circles the whole time, and I'm not sure if I made much sense. I'll get better at that, I swear. Silly season's going to get so silly this year. I'm going to have to keep my thoughts straight. I usually have like a page of notes when I do these episodes. I might need to start like really sitting down and writing like essays, because there are just a lot of details when it comes to some of these contracts and some of these situations. But anyway, y'all, hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for watching. I'll be back after tomorrow's race at Chicagoland. Hopefully that's a fun one. But thanks for watching, everyone. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter. You can follow me on Instagram. Continue the conversation over there. I appreciate that. And a big thank you, of course, to my Patreon supporters: Michael Harrison at G Was The Stars, Mentally Defective, Cameron James, John Koblenz, Jason Arlong, Wesley Donaldson, Isaac Dennison, Mika Suzuki, iFantasyRace.com, TheRacingInsiders.com, Matthew Koulopoulos, Pepe Cody Luscious, Jeremy Conkling, and the rest of these incredible Patreon supporters. I couldn't do this without the support from all of you, so thank you so much for continuing to support the show and help this thing get bigger and better. Got some exciting things planned. I can't say too much about what's happening next week, but I do have some I think very exciting things in the works. Of course, I will be in Wisconsin in a couple weeks at the Slinger Nationals up there near Milwaukee to see my boy Matt Kenseth race one more time. Hopefully we get to include him in a video because I'll be filming that whole thing. If you see me up there, say hi. I'm excited for that, and yeah, I'm excited for the race tomorrow. Hope you all enjoyed this episode, and I will see you again very, very soon.